In the vast silence between dying stars, there exists a kind of truth that scribes cannot capture and historians dare not speak. It lives in the spaces where memory falters, where records are quietly deleted, where entire chapters of galactic history simply cease to exist as if they never were. I have learned that some truths are too dangerous to preserve. My name is Valeth Soon Tarak, Senior Archivist of the Celestial Dominion, Keeper of 17 billion years of accumulated knowledge, Guardian of the memories of 10,000 fallen civilizations. I have catalogued the rise and collapse of empires whose names would take a lifetime to speak aloud. I have preserved the dying words of species who sang to black holes, who built temples in the hearts of neutron stars, who transcended flesh and became something like gods, before forgetting how to be anything at all. For 843 standard cycles, this has been my sacred duty. I believed I understood history. I believed I understood power. I believed I understood the gentle arc that all civilizations follow, from crude beginnings through bright ascension to inevitable, quiet decline. I was wrong about everything. What I am about to recount has been systematically purged from every archive in the known galaxy. The Celestine Council voted unanimously, something that has not occurred in 6,000 years, to ensure that what happened in the veiled reaches would never be spoken of again. Every sensor log, every transmission, every navigational record was hunted down and atomized. They believed they were protecting us. They believed that some knowledge is too destabilizing to survive. But I was there. I saw it with my own crystalline eyes. And before my neural lattice finally degrades beyond recovery, I need to speak the truth. This is the story of the human ship that was erased from records. This is why. The Celestine Dominion had endured for 47,000 standard years. Our territory once spanned 9 spiral arms. Our fleets numbered in the millions. Our stations hung like jewels around the cores of galaxies, harvesting the light of ancient suns. We had watched younger species crawl from their origin worlds, had guided some toward enlightenment, had, when necessary, ensured that others never rose at all. We were not cruel. We were simply careful. History had taught us that some civilizations were destined to burn themselves out. Others were destined to burn everything else. We saw ourselves as gardeners, pruning the galaxy of dangerous growth before it could spread. For most of my long life, I believed this was wisdom. Then the wrath came. I still remember the first reports, fragmented transmissions from our most distant outposts, ships emerging from tears in space-time itself, not through warplanes or jump gates or any technology we recognized, but through wounds in reality, as if something had clawed its way through the fabric of existence from somewhere that should not exist. The Wrath did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They did not even seem to perceive us as alive. They simply consumed. World after world fell silent. Fleet after fleet vanished from our tracking networks. In the span of a single generation, the Celestine Dominion lost more territory than we had conquered in 10,000 years. By the time I received my final assignment, we had been reduced to 17 star systems. 17 out of the countless thousands we once called home. The council had fragmented. Half of our surviving leadership had retreated into suspended animation, hoping to outlast the extinction. The other half had begun making preparations of a different kind, preparations that no archivist was permitted to witness. I was tired, I was terrified, I was old beyond measure, and I had watched my civilization crumble while I preserved records that soon no one would remain to read. It was in this state that I was summoned to the observation deck of the last great archive station, Meridian Prime. And it was there that I first saw the human ship. The vessel was unremarkable. That was my initial observation, and I recorded it with something approaching disappointment. After all the rumors, all the whispered speculation about this species that had somehow avoided both our guidance and our pruning, I had expected something more. The ship was perhaps 300 meters long, roughly cylindrical, with none of the elegant geometries that characterized civilized design. Its hull was scarred and pitted, bearing the marks of countless repairs. Its engines flickered unevenly. Its running lights were dim, as if power was being carefully conserved. It looked, I thought, like something a child might build from salvaged parts. "That is the vessel?" I asked, my voice carrying an exhaustion I no longer bothered to conceal. Beside me, Councillor Mirith clicked her mandibles in what passed for a grimace among my people. She was younger than me by 2 centuries, but the war had aged her terribly. Her crystalline carapace, once brilliant azure, had faded to a dull gray. Her movement carried the hesitation of one who had witnessed too much death. "That is their diplomatic vessel," she said, "the one they call Wayward Shepherd." "Diplomatic," I repeated. "So they finally agreed to speak with us?" "After 700 years of declining our invitations, yes. They claim they've been observing the situation." I felt a flicker of irritation. Observing, while our civilization burns. "They are strange, Archivist. Our intelligence on them remains frustratingly limited. They emerged from a single origin world approximately 1,200 years ago. Type G star, temperate climate, unremarkable in every measurable way. They should have been a footnote in our records." "Should have been?" Marith's eyes shifted, an involuntary tell that I had learned to recognize in our species. There are gaps in their history, sections of their expansion that we simply cannot account for. Ships that appear in one sector and then vanish for decades before reappearing elsewhere. Colonies that our surveys cannot locate, despite clear evidence of their existence. "Incompetence in our surveying division?" That was the initial assumption, but the pattern is too consistent. It's as if they're deliberately avoiding our observation, as if they know precisely where we're looking and when. I considered this as I studied the battered vessel drifting toward our docking bay. It did not match the profile of a species trying to hide from a superior civilization. It looked, if anything, like a ship that simply didn't care about appearances. "What do they want?" I asked. "They claim they want to help." I made a sound that might have been laughter, if I still remembered how. "Help? Now? When we are already dying?" "I know," Marith said quietly. "I told the council it was likely a deception, that they're probably here to assess our remaining resources before the Wrath finish us. But," she trailed off. "But? We have no other options, Archivist. We have sent envoys to every spacefaring species in the galaxy. The Kathrani refused to answer. The stellar chorus has gone silent. We believe they've already been consumed. The Mechanical Collective offered to preserve our cultural database, but they lack the capability to fight." "And the humans?" Marith turned to face me fully.
The humans are the only ones who responded with anything other than condolences or silence. They said they would come. They said they would listen. And then they said something that I cannot stop thinking about.
What did they say?
Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. They said, "We understand what you're facing. We've been there before." I found this claim absurd. The humans had emerged from their origin world barely a millennium ago. The Celestian Dominion had achieved interstellar travel before their planet had finished cooling. The idea that they could understand the destruction of an empire that had endured for 47,000 years was laughable. But I did not laugh. I was too tired. And somewhere in the back of my ancient mind, something was stirring, a curiosity I had not felt in centuries.
"I will meet them," I said. "If this is to be recorded, I should witness it firsthand."
Meredith nodded slowly. "Be careful, archivist. There is something about them that I cannot quite identify, something that makes my threat assessment processes uncertain." I understood what she meant only later. The humans who stepped off the Wayward Shepherd were, like their ship, unremarkable at first glance. There were 5 of them, dressed in simple gray uniforms that bore no insignia of rank or affiliation. Their leader, I learned later that they did not use that word, preferring coordinator, was a woman of perhaps middle age by their species' brief standards. She had dark hair streaked with gray, pulled back from a face that was weathered but alert. Her eyes were brown, a color I had not seen often among spacefaring species, and they moved constantly, taking in details with a practiced efficiency that spoke of long experience. Her name was Captain Sarah Chen. She walked with a slight limp, old damage that had not been fully repaired. This surprised me. The humans were known to possess advanced medical technology. Surely they could have corrected such an imperfection. Later, I would learn that she had chosen to keep it. A reminder, she said, of a lesson she refused to forget. "Archivist Vakalith Sun Tarak," she said, and I was startled by the precision of her pronunciation. "Our language is notoriously difficult for species with single-hinged vocal apparatus. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "You are welcome aboard Meridian Prime," I replied, falling back on formal protocols. "Though I must confess, Captain Chen, your timing is curious. We have extended invitations to your people for 7 centuries. You chose this moment, when we are perhaps months from extinction, to finally respond?" I expected defensiveness, justification, perhaps anger. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if my words were entirely reasonable. "You're right to question our timing. I won't insult you with convenient excuses." This was not the response I had anticipated. "Then what explanation do you offer?" Captain Chen glanced at her companions, 2 men and 2 women, all watching the exchange with expressions I could not read, before turning back to me. "We were waiting," she said simply. "Waiting for what? For us to weaken? To become desperate enough to accept whatever terms you offer?" "No." Her voice was gentle, but there was something beneath it, a weight. "We were waiting to see if you would ask." I did not understand. We have asked. We have sent hundreds of diplomatic overtures. "You sent demands," she corrected, not unkindly. "You sent instructions. You told us where we were permitted to expand, which trade routes we were allowed to use, which technologies we were forbidden to develop. You explained, very patiently, how things worked in the galaxy and what our place within it would be." My crystalline carapace tightened involuntarily. These were old policies, implemented long before my time, the standard protocols for managing emerging species. "Those guidelines were for your protection," I said. but the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Young civilizations often make errors that we know. Captain Chen's eyes met mine, and in that moment I saw something I had not expected. Understanding. We know why you did it. We know that from your perspective you were being responsible, careful. You had seen civilizations burn themselves out. You had seen them become threats. You were trying to prevent that.
Then you understand. We understand, but understanding is not the same as accepting. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. Your people have been the gardeners of this galaxy for a very long time. You've pruned species you deemed dangerous. You've guided others toward what you considered proper development. And maybe, for a while, that worked. It maintained stability for 40,000 years. It maintained your stability, she said. It maintained a galaxy shaped by your values, your priorities, your vision of what civilization should look like. And when something came along that didn't fit your models, something you couldn't categorize, couldn't control, couldn't prune, you had no way to respond. The words struck deeper than I wanted to admit. The wrath are not the disease, they're the symptom. They're what happens when a galaxy becomes too orderly, too controlled, too predictable. Captain Chen's voice softened. We've studied them, Archivist, not as closely as we'd like, but enough to understand their nature. They're drawn to complexity, to density, to the accumulated structures of ancient civilizations. They consume order. And chaos? Chaos is harder for them to find, harder to predict, harder to consume. I felt a chill spreading through my neural lattice. You're saying that our very sophistication made us a target? I'm saying that 47,000 years of careful gardening created a galaxy that was, from their perspective, a feast. She gestured at the observation window, at the distant stars that had once all been ours. Every perfectly optimized trade route, every standardized communication protocol, every carefully managed civilization developing along predictable lines. It was all so beautifully organized. And the humans? I asked, hearing the edge in my own voice. Were you so wise, so different? Did you escape their notice through your primitive chaos? Captain Chen smiled, and there was no joy in it, only memory. No, Archivist, we didn't escape their notice. She reached into her uniform and withdrew a small device, which she placed on the table between us. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a star chart I did not recognize. Do you know why there are gaps in our history? She asked. Sections that your surveyors couldn't account for? Ships that appeared and vanished? I shook my head. Because some of those ships never came back. Some of those colonies were wiped out so completely that even the debris was consumed. Some of those gaps are graves, Archivist. The holographic display began to mark locations. One by one, points of light turned red, then black, then vanished entirely. I counted them as they disappeared. 12, 27, 43. The count kept rising. The Vrath found us 400 years ago, Captain Chen continued, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was describing. We were expanding into what you call the outer reaches, territory your people had abandoned millennia ago. We thought it was empty. We thought we were alone. We were wrong. Another member of her team spoke for the first time. A young man with skin darker than Captain Chen's, and eyes that seemed older than his face. I'm Dr. Marcus Webb, archivist, xenoanthropologist. I've spent my entire career trying to understand what we lost in those first encounters, trying to reconstruct the knowledge that died with those colonies.
How many? I heard myself ask. 16.4 million people in the first wave, he said. 31 colonies. 8 major fleet engagements, all catastrophic losses. We lost the Coral Nebula in 6 hours, the Archive of Proxima in 3, the Shepherd Fleet. His voice caught. The Shepherd Fleet was the largest armada we had ever assembled. 40,000 vessels, 2 million crew. They bought us 11 days. I was stunned into silence. 16 million souls, 31 colonies, numbers that would have been footnotes in our records. We had lost billions, but the way he spoke them made each one feel like a wound. How did you survive? I finally managed. Captain Chen's smile returned, and this time there was something fierce beneath it, something almost feral. We didn't. I did not understand. But you were here. Your people continue. Your civilization. The civilization that existed before the Wraith is gone, she said. It died in the Coral Nebula. What you see now is what grew from the ashes. What we became when we stopped trying to be what we were and started becoming what we needed to be. She touched the holographic display, and the star chart shifted. New points of light began to appear, scattered, irregular, connected by lines that followed no logical pattern. We couldn't match their firepower. We couldn't predict their movements. We couldn't establish permanent colonies, because permanence was what they consumed. So we stopped being permanent. We stopped being predictable. We became nomads, Archivist. We became ghosts. Dr. Webb took up the narrative. Every human settlement is designed to be abandoned within 48 hours. Every ship is capable of independent operation for decades without resupply. Every child is taught to survive alone, to rebuild from nothing, to carry our entire cultural memory in their minds. We don't have archives, Archivist. We are archives. I looked at the 5 humans standing before me. Unimposing, unremarkable. Their ship was battered. Their uniforms were plain. Their technology, what I had seen of it, was functional rather than elegant. But I was beginning to understand. These were not representatives of a weak civilization. They were representatives of a civilization that had learned to look weak, that had survived precisely because it refused to look like a threat. Why are you telling us this? I asked. If your survival depends on obscurity, on appearing insignificant, why reveal yourselves now? Captain Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different, softer, more personal. Because we know what it feels like, she said. We know what it feels like to watch everything you built turn to ash. We know what it feels like to count the dead and run out of numbers. We know what it feels like to wonder if your species will even exist tomorrow. She stepped closer to me, close enough that I could see the lines of fatigue around her eyes, the faint tremor in her hands that she kept carefully controlled. You asked why we're here now, why we waited. The truth is, we've been watching you die for 40 years. We've been watching the Wrath tear your civilization apart, piece by piece, and every day we've debated whether to intervene. What stopped you? Fear, she admitted. Fear that if we showed ourselves, if we revealed what we've become, they would find us too. Fear that helping you would mean condemning our own people. And now? Now we've decided that some things are more important than survival. The words hung in the air between us. I realized, with a shock, that I was looking at something I had not encountered in all my centuries of archiving. A species that had stared into extinction and emerged not harder, not crueler,
but more human.
I did not know what that word meant then. I was still learning.
What can you offer? I asked. What can your people do that ours could not?
We can teach you to disappear, she said. We can teach you to scatter, to adapt, to survive without your cities and your fleets and your carefully maintained order. We can teach you to become something the Wrath don't know how to consume.
And in return?
Nothing, she shook her head. We're not here to negotiate. We're here because it's the right thing to do. Because we've been where you are, and no one came for us.
I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe that such altruism existed in a universe that had shown me nothing but calculated self-interest for 8 centuries. But I was old. I was cynical. And I had seen too many civilizations offer help with one hand while reaching for a weapon with the other. I will convey your offer to the council, I said formally. They will deliberate. They don't have time to deliberate. One of the other humans spoke, a woman with short silver hair and a scar that ran from her temple to her jaw. My name is Admiral Patricia Okafor, retired. I spent 30 years fighting the Wrath before they finally killed me. I blinked. Killed you? Clinically dead for 7 minutes after the Battle of the Fraying. Neural damage that required 18 months of regeneration. I came back because I wasn't finished. She stepped forward, and I saw the same fierce light in her eyes that I had glimpsed in Captain Chen. Your people have 3 star systems left that matter. The Wrath have been observed massing in the Darkfall corridor. We estimate 600 combat vessels, maybe more. At their current rate of advance, they'll reach Meridian Prime in 11 days. My neural lattice flickered with the kind of cold terror that I had learned to suppress. How do you know this? Our own scouts. Your scouts are using standardized protocols. Predictable approach vectors, predictable transmission frequencies. The Wrath learned to detect them 6 months ago. Admiral Okafor's voice was not unkind, but it was brutally honest. Every scout you've sent into the Darkfall has been consumed. You just don't know it yet. Then how? Because we don't use scouts, Archivist. We use shadows. I did not understand. I would not understand for several more days. But something in her certainty made me believe that she was telling the truth. The Council will not accept your offer, I said slowly. They are proud. They believe that if we are to die, we should die as we lived, with dignity, with order, with your sense of superiority intact? Captain Chen's voice was gentle, but the words struck like a blade. I understand. I've seen it before, in 1,000 forms. The need to believe that your way was the right way, even as it fails. And what would you have us do instead? Survive, she said simply. Survive, even if it means becoming something you would have dismissed as primitive a century ago. Survive, even if it means admitting that your way of existing isn't the only way. Survive, so that something of what you were can continue. I looked at her, this small, fragile being from a species that had seemed so insignificant, and I saw something that shamed me. I saw someone who had already done what she was asking us to do, who had already sacrificed her civilization's dignity, its pride, its sense of itself, who had already become something her ancestors would not have recognized. And she was still standing. I will speak to the Council, I said again, but I make no promises. We'll be here, Captain Chen replied, waiting. It's what we're good at. The council's deliberations lasted 6 hours. I watched from the observation gallery as the surviving members of Celestine leadership argued, accused, pleaded, and denied.
Counselor Marith spoke in favor of accepting the human offer. She was shouted down by Counselor Veth, who insisted that any species offering help without demanding payment must be planning betrayal. Counselor Ashani argued for a diplomatic middle ground, accepting the humans' intelligence about the Wrath while rejecting their philosophical proposals. She was overruled by Counselor Rent, who believed that any acknowledgement of the humans' capabilities would constitute an unacceptable surrender of prestige.
Prestige. We were discussing prestige while our civilization burned.
I left before the vote was taken. I already knew how it would go. Instead, I returned to the docking bay, where the wayward shepherd still waited. The human crew had been given guest quarters, but I found Captain Chen in the ship's small common area, staring at a display that showed the stars outside.
"The answer is no," I said.
She did not turn. I know. I could see it in your face when you left. How?
You looked disappointed. If you had expected them to refuse, you wouldn't have been disappointed. You were hoping for something different.
I settled into a seat across from her, feeling the weight of my centuries pressing down on me. You are remarkably perceptive.
It's a survival trait. Reading faces, reading situations, knowing when to push and when to run. She finally turned to look at me. "I'm sorry, Archivist. Not for them. They've made their choice. But for you, I can see that you're not like them."
I am Celestine. I am exactly like them.
No, she shook her head. You're something they forgot how to be. You're curious, you're willing to question, you're capable of imagining that you might be wrong. A faint smile crossed your face. Those are dangerous traits in a civilization that values certainty. I had no response to this. She was right, and we both knew it.
"What will you do now?" I asked.
Wait. Watch. When the Vroth arrive, we'll do what we can to evacuate civilians who want to leave. It won't be many. Most of your people won't trust us. But some will. Some always do.
And the council? The fleet?
They'll fight. They'll lose. The Wrath will consume them. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but I saw the sadness in her eyes. We've seen it happen before. We'll see it happen again. All we can do is save whoever's willing to be saved. I considered her words for a long moment. Then I did something I had not done in 4 centuries. I asked for help. Teach me, I said. Whatever you were going to teach the council, teach me instead. If I am to record the end of my civilization, I would like to understand what we might have become. Captain Chen studied me with those brown eyes that missed nothing. Then she nodded slowly. Okay, she said. Let's start with the most important lesson. Do you know why we call this ship Wayward Shepherd? I assumed it was a reference to your cultural mythology. It is. A shepherd who led their flock away from the expected path, who chose the wilderness instead of the safe pastures, who kept moving then standing still meant death. She leaned forward. The Wrath consume order, Archivist. They consume patterns, structures, predictable behaviors. They consume civilizations that believe they've figured out the right way to exist. And humanity survived by never believing that. Humanity survived by making disagreement into an art form. We argue about everything. Our colonies don't coordinate, they compete. Our fleets don't follow unified doctrine. Each captain chooses their own tactics. From the outside, we look like chaos. We look like a civilization that can't get its act together. And from the inside? From the inside. She paused, searching for words. We call it structured chaos, a system that looks random but isn't, a society that appears weak but survives precisely because no single attack can destroy it. You can kill a human fleet, but there's always another fleet that was doing something completely different. You can destroy a human colony, but the knowledge it held is already scattered across 1,000 ships.
You can assassinate our leaders, but we have no leaders, only coordinators, and there are always more. I was beginning to understand. You made yourselves impossible to predict. We made ourselves impossible to consume. She smiled, and it was a smile of hard-won wisdom. The Vrath don't know how to eat chaos, Archivist. It gives them indigestion. Over the next 7 days, I learned more about humanity than our entire intelligence apparatus had gathered in 7 centuries. I learned that their apparent technological backwardness was deliberate, that they had access to capabilities they chose not to display, that their battered ships and flickering engines were camouflage designed to make them seem less threatening than they were. I learned that their population was not 4 billion, as our estimates suggested, but closer to 78 billion, scattered across nomadic fleets and hidden settlements that our surveys had never located. That every apparent refugee ship we had observed was actually a mobile city, carrying manufacturing, agriculture, and culture through the void between stars. I learned that they had been fighting the Vrath for 400 years. Not winning, survival was not the same as victory, but enduring, adapting, learning. And I learned that they had developed weapons we had never imagined, not because they were more technologically advanced than the Celestian Dominion, they weren't, but because they had approached the problem differently.
Show me, I said on the 6th day.
Admiral Okafor led me to the Wayward Shepherd's Bridge, which was smaller and more cluttered than I had expected. She activated a tactical display that showed the approaching Vrath fleet. Standard Celestine doctrine would have you form a defensive formation around Meridian Prime, she said. Concentrated fire, overlapping shields, mutual support. It is the most efficient use of our remaining forces. It's also exactly what they expect. She manipulated the display and I saw projections of how the battle would unfold. Formation against formation, orderly destruction. Your fleet will last approximately 4 hours before complete annihilation. The Vrath will sustain maybe 12% losses, acceptable by their standards. And your alternative? She smiled that fierce smile I had come to recognize. Chaos. She input new parameters, and the simulation changed. The Celestine fleet scattered, breaking into small groups that moved in seemingly random patterns. Some attacked, some fled, some circled around. The Vrath formation broke apart, trying to pursue. You can't beat them in a straight fight, she explained, but you can force them into a crooked one. Make them chase you. Make them overextend. Make them spend resources hunting phantoms while the real threats slip past. This still ends in defeat.
No, this ends in evacuation. While you're running them in circles, we move civilian transports to safety. Whoever wants to leave, leaves. Whoever wants to fight, fights, but on their own terms, not the enemy's. The Council will never approve dispersal of the fleet. It goes against every tactical doctrine we possess.
I know, she said quietly. That's why we're not asking the Council. On the 9th day, the Vrath entered the outer reaches of the Meridian system. I stood on the observation deck, watching the distant flashes of light that marked the death of our picket ships. The Council had implemented its defensive formation exactly as Admiral Okafor had predicted. Concentrated fire, overlapping shields, mutual support.
Beside me, Captain Chen was speaking quietly into a communication device I did not recognize.
Shepard protocols are active, she said. All waypoints confirmed. The children are ready to move.
Children? I asked.
She turned to me, and I saw something in her face that I had not seen before. Resolution, and beneath it, something older. Grief. We didn't come here alone, Archivist. The wayward shepherd is just the visible part. There are 47 other human vessels in this system, and they've been positioning for 6 days.
47? I had detected only one. Why would you conceal?
Because some of those ships are going to die tonight. And their crews knew that before they volunteered. I stared at her. You knew the Council would refuse. You knew they would implement their standard defense. You planned for this from the beginning.
We hoped they would accept our help. We prepared for them to refuse. Her voice was steady, but I could see the weight she carried. We couldn't save your civilization, Archivist. It was dying before we got here. But we could save some of your people, the ones who were willing to be saved.
How many? 412,000. Civilians, mostly. Families with children. Archivists and teachers and craftspeople, the kinds of people who carry culture in their bones. She smiled softly. We've been quietly evacuating them for the past 6 days, while the Council debated, while your fleet prepared its glorious last stand. We've been moving everyone who would come with us.
I felt something I had not felt in centuries. Gratitude mixed with shame.
The Council doesn't know.
The Council would have stopped us if they knew. Some of your people would rather die with dignity than live in what they consider exile. She reached out and touched my arm, a gesture of intimacy that I would have found presumptuous a week ago. Now it felt like kindness.
But you're still here, Archivist. You're not on an evacuation transport. Why? Because I am old, I said. Because I have lived too long and seen too much. Because I thought that if my civilization was going to die, I should die with it. And now? I considered her question. Outside the viewport, another flash of light marked another ship lost. The Celestine fleet was engaging the Wrath Vanguard, and they were losing, just as Admiral Okafor had predicted.
Now I am not sure, I admitted. You have shown me that survival does not require dignity, that adaptation is not defeat, that becoming something new is not the same as dying.
But I am afraid. The words came out before I could stop them. I am afraid of becoming something I do not recognize. I am afraid of living in a galaxy where everything I knew is gone. I am afraid of having to start over after 800 years of believing I understood how the universe worked.
Captain Chen nodded slowly. That's the hardest part. Not the running, not the hiding, not even the fighting. The hardest part is admitting that everything you believed was wrong. Admitting that survival requires you to become someone new.
How did you do it? How did your people do it? We didn't have a choice. The Wraith didn't give us time to deliberate. They hit us hard and fast, and by the time we understood what was happening, the old civilization was already gone. We had to adapt or die.
And you chose adaptation.
Some of us did. Others, she hesitated. Others couldn't let go. They fought the Wrath in the traditional way, massed formations, overwhelming force, glorious last stands. They died believing they were right, and maybe they were, in their own way, but they didn't survive.
Another explosion flared on the display.
The Celestine fleet was fragmenting now, individual ships breaking from formation as their commanders realized that the battle was already lost.
"It's starting," Admiral Okafor said, joining us on the observation deck. The Council's flagship just took a critical hit. They're signaling a general retreat.
Too late, Captain Chen murmured. They should have scattered 10 minutes ago.
"What happens now?" I asked. "Now we show them something new."
Admiral Okafor spoke into her own communication device. "All Shepard vessels, this is Admiral Okafor. Initiate Protocol 7. I say again, Protocol 7.
I watched the tactical display as dozens of new signatures appeared across the system. Human ships emerging from hiding places I had not known existed. Some were small, barely larger than shuttles. Others were the size of Celestine cruisers.
They did not form a unified fleet. They did not move in coordinated patterns. They swarmed.
The Varath formation, so confident in its pursuit of the retreating Celestine vessels, suddenly found itself under attack from multiple directions. Ships that had seemed like fleeing refugees turned and fired. Weapons platforms that had appeared to be debris activated and launched volleys of exotic munitions.
Chaos, I whispered. Structured chaos, Captain Chen corrected. Every captain out there is making their own decisions, following their own tactics, using their own judgment about when to engage and when to run. There's no command structure for the Wrath to target, no central coordination for them to disrupt.
But how do they avoid destroying each other? Trust, training, cultural memory. She watched the battle unfold with a calm that I could not fathom. Every human child is taught the same basic principles. Never attack what your allies are engaging. Always leave an exit path, and if you can't contribute, get out of the way. It's messy, but it works.
I watched in astonishment as the human swarm tore into the Vroth formation. They were not winning. The Vroth was still destroying human ships at an alarming rate, but they were disrupting, fragmenting, creating gaps. And through those gaps, the surviving Celestine vessels were escaping.
"You're sacrificing yourselves," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "You're dying so that our ships can retreat." "Some of us are dying," Admiral Okafor acknowledged. "Most will escape. The ones who don't." She paused, and I saw something in her eyes that I had not expected to see in a military commander. Sorrow. The ones who don't knew what they were signing up for. "Why?" I demanded. "Why would you do this? You could have evacuated your own people. You could have left us to our fate. Why are you sacrificing human lives for a civilization that dismissed you as primitive?"
Captain Chen turned to face me fully. In the reflected light of the battle, her face was half in shadow.
"Because we remember what it felt like," she said. "We remember what it felt like to be alone, to watch our world burn, to wonder if anyone would come. No one came for us, Archivist. We had to save ourselves. And we did. But the cost..." She shook her head. "The cost was almost too high. When we finally started encountering other species, we swore an oath. Not a law, not a policy, an oath, sworn by every human who serves aboard a vessel. We swore that we would never let another species face what we faced alone. That we would always come when called, always help when asked, always sacrifice when necessary."
"But we didn't ask," I said. "The Council refused your offer."
"You asked, Archivist." Captain Chen smiled, and it was the saddest smile I had ever seen. "You asked. And that was enough."
The battle raged for 3 more hours.
I watched as human ships threw themselves into the path of Wrath weapons.
I watched as Celestine vessels, following tactics they had never been trained for, slipped through gaps created by human sacrifice. I watched as the vast Wrath formation, so confident in its approach, found itself fighting an enemy it could not predict.
By the time it was over, the Wrath had taken 17% casualties, the highest losses they had ever sustained in a single engagement. 34 of the 47 human vessels that had revealed themselves were destroyed, but more than 800 Celestian ships had escaped into deep space, carrying survivors who had abandoned their formation and followed the path the humans had created.
And the evacuation transports, the 47 civilian vessels that had slipped away during the battle, were already light years away, carrying 400,000 of my people toward an uncertain future.
"We need to go," Captain Chen said quietly. "The Wrath are regrouping. They'll come from Meridian Prime next. The Council is dead. Their flagship was destroyed 90 minutes ago." Her voice was gentle. "I'm sorry, Archivist. I know they were your people."
I should have felt grief. I should have felt rage. Instead, I felt only exhaustion.
"What happens now?" "Now you decide. You can stay here and die with your station if that's what you want, or you can come with us. There's a place for you among the shepherds if you're willing to become something new."
I looked at the tactical display one last time. Meridian Prime was quiet now, its defenses disabled, its population already evacuated. The great archive station that had been my home for 8 centuries hung in space like a monument to a civilization that no longer existed.
And in that moment, I understood something that I had been too proud to see.
The Celestian Dominion was not destroyed by the Wrath. It was destroyed by its own certainty, by its conviction that there was one right way to exist, one correct path for civilizations to follow, one proper form for intelligence to take.
The humans survived because they had no such certainty. They survived because they questioned everything, adapted to everything, and refused to believe that any single answer was final.
"I will come with you," I said, "but I have one request."
Name it. I want to see. I want to understand what you've built. Not just the tactics and the technology, but the philosophy, the culture, the way you think.
Captain Chen studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded.
"Okay, Archivist, I'll show you."
The journey to the Shepherd's Refuge, the closest thing humanity had to a capital, though they would never call it that, took 43 days. During that time, I learned things that the Celestine Dominion's intelligence apparatus had never suspected. I learned that humanity's scattered nomadic civilization was not a retreat from their former glory, but an intentional evolution. They had studied the Wrath, analyzed their consumption patterns, and deliberately restructured their entire society to become unpredictable. Every aspect of human civilization was designed to resist consumption. Their distribution of knowledge, their redundancy of skills, their deliberate cultivation of disagreement.
I learned that they had been preparing for this moment for centuries, not specifically for the Celestine Dominion's fall, but for the inevitable collapse of any ordered civilization that the Wrath encountered. They had positioned themselves to be rescuers, knowing that sooner or later the opportunity would come.
And I learned about the ship.
It happened on the 37th day, during a quiet moment in the Wayward Shepherd's common area. I was studying human cultural archives when Dr. Webb approached me with an expression I had learned to recognize as discomfort. "Archivist, there's something you should know, something that isn't in the official archives."
"What kind of something?"
He sat down across from me, glancing around as if to ensure we were alone. You asked us why we chose this moment to reveal ourselves. The captain gave you the official answer, waiting to see if you would ask. That's true, but it's not the whole truth.
Tell me. 400 years ago, when the Wrath first attacked us, we were losing. Badly. We were making all the same mistakes your people just made. Concentrated defenses, unified command, orderly retreats. We didn't know any better. We thought that was how wars were fought. What changed? A ship arrived. He paused, weighing his next words. A single ship, of a design we had never seen. It entered our space without warning during the worst battle of the war, the Battle of the Fraying, where Admiral Okafor died and came back.
What kind of ship?
We didn't know. We still don't know. It was organic, mostly, like something grown rather than built. Its hull shifted and changed even as we watched it. And it was old, Archivist. Old in a way that nothing in this galaxy should be. I felt a chill spreading through my neural lattice. What did it do? It fought against the Wrath. Just one ship, but it... He shook his head. I've seen the recordings. They're fragmentary, our sensors couldn't handle the energy outputs, but what I saw was impossible. It wasn't just destroying the Wrath fleet, it was teaching us. Every maneuver it made, every tactic it employed was visible to our surviving ships, like it was demonstrating. Demonstrating what? How to fight chaos with chaos, how to survive without order, how to become unpredictable. His voice dropped to a whisper. In 12 hours, that single ship destroyed more than 2,000 Wrath vessels. Then it transmitted a message in a format we could understand, and it left. What was the message? Dr. Webb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. It said, "Remember this. Teach others. When the time comes, repay the debt." I sat in stunned silence. A single ship. Thousands of Wrath destroyed. Technology beyond anything our archives had ever recorded. Why are you telling me this? Because we erased it, he said. Every record, every sensor log, every transmission. We hunted down every copy and destroyed it. Officially, the Battle of the Fraying ended with the Wrath retreating due to unknown causes. The ship never existed. Why would you erase such a thing? Because we don't know what it was. We don't know where it came from, and we don't know if it's watching us, even now. He leaned forward, his eyes intense. But we know one thing. Whatever it was, it saved us. It taught us how to survive, and it asked us to repay the debt. Understanding dawned, the rescue of my people is part of the repayment. Every species we save, every civilization we help escape the Wrath is our way of honoring that debt. We don't know if the ship is still out there. We don't know if it's keeping track, but we act as if it is, because that's what it asked of us. And the erasure of records? Some things are too dangerous to remember. Some knowledge, if it falls into the wrong hands, could be catastrophic. The ship understood that. It didn't want to be studied, analyzed, replicated. It just wanted us to survive, and to help others survive. He smiled wearily. So we erased it. We tell the story only to those we trust absolutely, and we carry on its mission, even though we don't fully understand it. I thought about this for a long time after our conversation ended. An unknown ship appearing at the crucial moment. Technology beyond comprehension. A message of obligation and hope. It should have seemed implausible. Instead, it felt like a piece of a puzzle I had been trying to assemble for 800 years.
We arrived at the Shepherd's Refuge on the 43rd day.
I had expected something grand, a hidden fortress perhaps, or a massive space station comparable to Meridian Prime. What I found instead was modest.
The refuge was an asteroid, perhaps 2 kilometers across, honeycombed with tunnels and chambers. It housed approximately 3,000 permanent residents, though Captain Chen explained that the population fluctuated constantly as ships arrived and departed. There were no magnificent buildings, no sweeping boulevards, no monuments to past glory, just functional spaces, carefully maintained, designed to be abandoned at a moment's notice.
And yet, it felt more alive than Meridian Prime ever had.
I met humans of every conceivable variety. Scientists debating theories with the passion of warriors. Artists creating works that would be transmitted to 1,000 ships before being deleted. Children learning skills that ranged from agricultural techniques to combat medicine to the composition of epic poetry. They were not organized. They were not efficient. They argued constantly about everything from resource allocation to the meaning of existence. Watching them, I could not understand how they had survived as a civilization for 12 centuries. And then, gradually, I began to see it. They did not survive despite their chaos. They survived because of it. Every argument was a form of stress testing, examining ideas from every angle before adopting them. Every disagreement was an opportunity to refine understanding. Every failure was studied, analyzed, and transformed into a lesson.
They had no central authority to make decisions, so everyone learned to think for themselves. They had no guaranteed resources, so they learned to adapt to any situation. They had no certainty about the future, so they learned to be ready for anything.
They were, I realized, the most resilient civilization I had ever encountered. Not because they were strong, but because they were flexible. Not because they were unified, but because they were diverse. Not because they knew the right way to do things, but because they were always willing to try a new way.
I spent 6 months among them before I understood the final piece of the puzzle.
It happened during a ceremony I had never witnessed before, a memorial for the humans who had died in the Battle of Meridian. 34 ships, their crews and passengers, all honored in a ritual that was unlike anything in Celestine tradition. They did not praise the dead for their sacrifice. They did not celebrate their courage or their loyalty. Instead, they told stories.
One by one, survivors stood up and described the people they had lost, not as heroes or martyrs, but as individuals. The woman who loved ancient poetry, the man who could fix any engine with improvised tools, the child who had asked endless questions about alien biology, the elder who had survived 3 previous Vrath encounters and had finally run out of luck.
They laughed at ridiculous stories. They wept at touching ones. They disagreed about details and argued about interpretations. It was messy and emotional and utterly human.
And at the end, Captain Chen stood and spoke.
"We don't have monuments," she said. "We don't have eternal flames or sacred temples. We have each other. We have memories. We have the promise that as long as one of us survives, we will carry the story of everyone we've lost."
She looked around the crowded chamber, meeting the eyes of humans and refugees alike.
That's what it means to be a shepherd. Not to lead, but to remember. Not to conquer, but to preserve. Not to impose our way on others, but to offer them a choice.
She looked directly at me.
Archivist, you spent your life preserving knowledge.
You believed that was your purpose, to maintain the records, to ensure that nothing was forgotten. But you preserved facts, not people. You preserved events, not meanings.
I felt something stirring in my crystalline core, something I had not felt in a very long time.
We're asking you to do something harder, Captain Chen continued. We're asking you to preserve us, not our facts and our technologies and our tactical doctrines. Us, our stories, our failures, our hopes, the way we argue and disagree and somehow still find a way forward together.
Why me? I asked. I am not human. I barely understand your ways.
That's exactly why, she said. You see us from outside. You see things we're too close to notice. You can tell our story in a way we never could.
I thought about her words for a long time. Days passed, and I found myself observing the humans with new eyes, recording not their technologies or their tactics, but their laughter and their tears, their arguments and their reconciliations, their fear and their courage.
I began to understand that this was what the ship, the mysterious ship that had saved them 400 years ago, had recognized. Not humanity's strength or intelligence or technological capability, but something deeper.
Their refusal to give up.
Their ability to transform tragedy into purpose.
Their willingness to sacrifice for others, even strangers, even former enemies.
I found Captain Chen on the observation deck of the refuge, watching a convoy of ships departing for distant stars.
I have reached a decision, I said.
She turned to me, waiting. I will do what you ask. I will preserve your story, not as an archivist of the Celestian Dominion, but as something new, something I do not yet fully understand.
Thank you.
But I have a condition.
Name it.
Tell me the whole truth about the ship, not just what Dr. Webb shared. Everything. Every detail, every theory, every speculation. Captain Chen was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than I had ever heard it.
We don't know what it was. We've spent 400 years trying to understand, and we're no closer to an answer. But there are theories.
Tell me.
Some believe it was an ancient civilization, a species that reached the peak of development and then chose to step back, to observe and intervene only when necessary. Others believe it was something stranger, a living ship, perhaps, or an artificial intelligence that had evolved beyond its original programming.
And you? What do you believe?
She smiled. I believe it doesn't matter. What matters is what it did. It saved us when we were dying. It taught us when we were ignorant. It asked us to pay forward the gift we had received. And we've tried, Archivist. For 4 centuries, we've tried to live up to that obligation.
Is that why you came for us? For my people?
Partly, but also because we knew what you could become. Your civilization was dying because it had forgotten how to change. But the individuals, people like you, still had the capacity for growth. You just needed a chance.
I looked at the departing convoy, carrying the survivors of the Celestine Dominion toward an uncertain future. They would join human settlements, learn human ways, and eventually contribute their own knowledge to the growing tapestry of surviving civilizations.
They would change. They would become something their ancestors would not have recognized. But they would survive.
There is one more thing, Captain Chen said. Something I haven't told anyone, not even the Admiral.
Yes?
When the ship left, after the Battle of the Fraying,
It transmitted one final message, not a command or a request, but a warning.
What warning?
It said, "The Vrath are not the final threat. They are the symptoms of a deeper sickness. When the time comes, you will need to be ready." I felt a chill that reached to the core of my being. What does that mean? We don't know. We've spent centuries trying to understand, but the meaning eludes us. She turned to face me fully, and I saw something in her eyes that I had not seen before. Fear, yes, but also determination. But we're preparing, Archivist. Every species we save, every civilization we help survive, every fragment of knowledge we preserve, it's all part of a plan. A plan for something we don't fully understand, against an enemy we can't yet see. And if you're wrong, if there is no deeper threat, then we will have built a galaxy of survivors. A galaxy of species that learned to set aside their differences and work together. A galaxy that can face any challenge, because it has already faced the worst. I considered her words. In my long life, I had encountered many grand claims and ambitious plans. Most had ended in failure and disappointment. But there was something different about the humans. They did not claim to have all the answers. They did not pretend to understand the mysteries of existence. They simply kept moving forward, adapting, surviving, and helping others to do the same. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps that was all any civilization could hope for. "I will record this," I said. "All of it. The battle, the rescue, the ship that saved you, the warning you received. I will preserve it, not as an archive of the Celestian Dominion, but as a testament to something larger." "And the ship itself?" I thought about this for a long moment. The mysterious vessel that had appeared from nowhere, saved humanity, and vanished. The records that had been erased, the truth that had been hidden, the debt that was still being repaid. "I will record that it existed," I said finally, "but I will not record the details. Some knowledge is too dangerous to preserve. Some truths must be earned, not given." Captain Chen nodded slowly. "You understand." "I am beginning to. This is the truth of the human ship that was erased from records. It was not a single ship. It was not a moment of miraculous intervention. It was a pattern, a thread running through the fabric of galactic history, appearing at moments of crisis, teaching civilizations how to survive, and then vanishing before it could be studied or understood. The Celestian Dominion was not the first to receive its help. We were not the last. Across the galaxy, in the archives of 100 surviving civilizations, there are gaps where knowledge should be, erasures where records once existed, silences where stories were once told. Every one of those gaps marks a debt unpaid, a gift given without expectation of return. A moment when something ancient and unfathomable chose to intervene on behalf of the small and the struggling. The humans call themselves shepherds now. They have spent 4 centuries living up to that name, guiding survivors to safety, teaching the desperate how to adapt, and always, always paying forward the gift they were given. I have joined them. I am no longer Archivist of the Celestian Dominion. That title died with my civilization, and I do not mourn its passing. I am something new now, something my ancestors would not recognize. I have learned to live without certainty, to embrace change rather than fear it, to find purpose in service rather than preservation.
And I have learned the most important lesson of all.
The universe is not kind. It does not reward the orderly or protect the powerful. It is a vast, indifferent void that consumes civilizations like flames consume dry grass. But there are lights in the darkness, small flames that refuse to go out, species that endure not through strength but through stubborn refusal to surrender. Shepherds who guide others to safety not because they are commanded to, but because they remember what it felt like to be lost.
The humans taught me this. They taught it to my people. They are teaching it still, across a galaxy that is slowly learning to survive. And somewhere out there, in the spaces between the stars, something ancient continues to watch.
We do not know what it is. We do not know what it wants. We do not know when or if we will see it again.
But we will be ready.
This record will not be preserved. It will be transmitted, shared, remembered, and eventually forgotten. That is as it should be. The humans understood this 400 years ago when they erased the record of the ship that saved them.
Some truths are too important to archive.
Some truths must be lived. I am Valith Sun Tarak, once archivist of the Celestian Dominion, now something else entirely. I have witnessed the death of my civilization and the birth of something new. I have learned that survival is not about permanence, but about change. And I have learned that even in the darkest void, there are those who carry light.
The human ship was erased from records.
But its lesson endures.
In every species that learns to adapt, in every civilization that chooses survival over pride, in every shepherd who guides a stranger to safety.
That is the debt we repay. That is the purpose we serve.
And that is why, when the final threat comes, whatever it may be, we will face it together. Not as the galaxy that was,
But as the galaxy that will be. Always adapting. Always surviving. Always remembering. This is the truth. This is why the ship was erased. Because some lessons must be learned, not taught.
And some lights must be carried, not preserved.
The stars are waiting. And we are ready.